Here we go. This is Candace Estelle with Bex Smith. Bex, you do happen to be one of my best friends, but I will try to be a little bit more professional during our interview. And I wanted to start by making a few statements. So, A, you're comfortable and aware that you are being voice recorded right now?
Yes.
Great. And B, you are aware that I'm going to use the contents of our conversation for an article that will be published online and in the future published as a physical book?
Yes.
Wonderful. All right. So you consent to all of these things and you love me. Can you go ahead and say yes?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. I have that on tape now, so I'll never forget. Okay, so Bex, one of the reasons I wanted to interview you, aside from the fact that you're just one of my favorite people, is that you have a very interesting life. So you are technically an American now, right?
Yes.
Right.
I am dual citizen.
Yes, because you are actually from Canada. So you're also someone who's an immigrant and you've gone through that life. So can you fill us in on what made you decide to move to the States and what made you decide to stay?
Well, I'll be perfectly honest. I fell in love with a man, American man. And we decided that New York City was the best place for both of us to pursue future careers and work. So I moved in with him. We thought about him moving up to Toronto to be with me, but we decided that he had more of an established career, so it gave us better opportunities. So I moved in with him.
So how did you meet him then if he was American and you were Canadian? I know that border doesn't even touch.
Well, it does. New York borders with Ontario. I'm from Ontario. He was living in New York City, and he's working for Blue Man Group at the time. He was the master electrician. I was hired for the Toronto production of Blue Man Group in 2005.
And were you one of the Blue Men?
Pardon me?
Were you one of the Blue Men?
No. I was the stagehand. I was a showrunner, stagehand. That meant that I did the show every single day. And because I was on the show crew, they paired me with him to help me learn all of the Blue Man specific technology that I was going to have to handle on a regular basis. And we just hit it off.
Cool. So the Blue Man specific technology things, so PVC pipes?
Yes, but also a lot of the props and things that I was technically responsible for, they were part of my daily activities.
Okay.
With prepping all of those things and placing them and all of that stuff.
So I don't know if I've ever told you this, but the first maybe technical concert I went to, it's hard to judge between how old I was because I honestly don't remember, but I do believe that the first show I ever saw is Blue Man Group in Las Vegas in the early 2000s.
Wow.
And I loved it so much. I actually still have the t-shirt I wore because I wore a white t-shirt.
Oh, to catch all the paint.
Well, they didn't really throw paint on us. I don't know if we had good enough tickets for something like that. But at the end, they come out and they meet everyone. And I had my white t-shirt and I was wanting them to put their handprints on it. And I was young enough to not realize that wasn't appropriate.
Oh.
Because I was like, the handprints. And he just kept being like, because they don't speak. So I have a t-shirt and it has a little blue fingerprint. Yeah.
That's what they do.
Yeah, on my t-shirt. I do think it says 2002 on it.
Oh, that's cool.
So I think that's around when I did it. So it's actually something we have in common because I too love the Blue Man Group. And I even went and saw them again in Vegas about 6 years ago.
Nice. I haven't seen the show since I left the show, since our show closed. Yeah.
Did you?
If I ever go to Vegas again, I might try to go again.
It's nice. I have fun. Did you ever see the video that they did? The Blue Man Group video documentary show they did. They have, you'll probably know her name, but she sang with them sometimes. Venus something, I want to say. And
yeah, I remember. That was the tour that they did.
Yeah, no problem. So, yeah, I loved that video. I watched it on repeat for that, I think, whole year, where I was just like, oh my gosh, I was so entranced by her like light up dress. Like I've never wanted something more in my life.
That's so cool.
So when you told me that you had worked on Blue Man Group, I was like secretly fangirling a little bit. Is there any behind the scenes information you could give?
It was one of the best times of my life. I had so much fun. I loved it so much.
You had a lot of fun. You did some really cool career things, and you met the love of your life. So the Blue Man Group is really formative for you.
Yeah. I consider it the beginning of my adulthood.
All you had to do was blue yourself. Sorry. I watch a lot of Arrested Development.
That was perfect.
So is there any behind the scenes things you could tell us about a Blue Man Group tour or being a stagehand?
Like what?
I don't know. I wouldn't know what's behind the scenes. I'm always up front.
I loved it because because I was on the show call, it meant that I had to perform all of the tasks and duties exactly the same way, in exactly the same order, at exactly the same time every night. Mm-hmm. And I excelled at that. I was so good by the time we closed the show, it was running so smoothly for me. I could do it with my eyes closed.
Wow. So you're really good at the job. Okay.
I was, yeah.
Here's the behind the scene things that maybe you can tell us. When the Blue Man Group are not blue, do any of them have hair?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. As a kid, I really thought that they all had to shave their heads to be a part of the show.
No, they wear bald caps.
Yeah. I didn't even have...
glue it down. They cover their ears. And then they plaster this it's very specially made body like oil based paint. They cover their whole body, their whole like up here. And then they wear gloves so that their hands are blue. Mm-hmm. Yep.
And how long does it take for them to get that paint off?
Oh, to get it off? I don't know. I couldn't tell you that.
I'm asking because I actually did a podcast episode recently where I dress up for my podcast and I eat a food from whatever I'm talking about. And the thing I was talking about was Lore Olympus, which is a comic series. And they are all different colors in the series. And I went with Persephone, who's the main character, who is pink. And so I actually had to color myself in body paint, bright pink.
Cool.
And it took 4 days before I wasn't pink everywhere anymore. And
I will tell you that if you got blue on you, like if it touched your skin, you'd have a stain for days.
Yeah.
No matter, like you washing, showering, you would still see a blue spot, like a blue haze on your skin. It was one of the defining features of working there. You'd be covered in blue all the time.
Well, then how were they going out in public and people not knowing that was them?
Oh, a blue man, look at their eyes because they're going to have blue eyeliner.
Really?
If they've done a show within the last 2 days, they're going to have blue eyeliner. You'll see it.
That's really interesting. That's kind of very similar to like in Wicked, because you have the green fingernails and stuff for the Wicked Witch, who's not really wicked. And the understudy is also not allowed to do her nails at all, except to have them green at all times in case she goes on.
Oh, wow.
I really love the details of like shows like that where you find out like, that everyone's kind of blue all the time, or, you've got to have the green paint. For me, my behind the scenes is that I was pink for 4 days and my bathroom was pink for at least a month. I had to buy a special cleaner to get it to fully come off of my shower.
Yeah.
So you did stage management, right?
No, I was never a stage manager. I actually was never really good at that kind of work. It was a lot of like computer scheduling and organizing stuff. I did learn some stage management related skills when I went to college. I did technical theater production in college, but I never excelled at that. I was what they called hard tech, meaning lighting, sound, rigging, staging. That was the kind of work that I was doing, was all of the technical, physical labor stuff, versus soft tech, which was stage management, costume, props making, set design, set painting, that kind of thing.
Okay. That's really cool, though. Sorry, I didn't know the difference in titles. It just sounded like you were running a lot of stuff, like prop master, basically. So,
well, as a stagehand, I was responsible for a bunch of different props that were used in different parts of the show. I also had show cues, running cues, we called them. So during the show, I was backstage and I was arranging things and putting things in place and taking things away, etc.
okay. Now, I'm American, so I have no idea, but what's it like growing up in Canada? You know, are there any big differences since you've lived there and here in America?
Well, that's hard for me to say because I was a child in Canada and an adult in America. So I don't really have any experience with what childhood in America is actually like. But as a Canadian growing up in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, I felt we had a really good overall education.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think as an adult, I have the basics of understanding of the world and physics and math and all of the important things about understanding reality because of my public school education.
Okay.
We were, in the 90s especially, we were fed like a pro-Canada patriotic propaganda that compared us to Americans,
Mm-hmm.
in a way. And a lot of how we defined our nationality came from how we were not like America.
Interesting, which is what Americans do.
So I grew up with a really strong anti-American bias. Americans were loud and rude and fat, and they ate garbage, and they were uneducated, and all of those horrible things that are absolutely not true. Absolutely. So I was 23 when I immigrated, and I carried that bias with me for a very long time. But gradually, over the years, I have let it go because I've recognized over time that people are people, no matter where you go. And I might have grown up with this Canadian bias, but that doesn't mean that these Americans that are my neighbors now are not good people, that they don't have all of these amazing qualities that I can learn from and I can benefit from. So it took me quite a while, but I let that go. And I finally decided to get citizenship in 2020.
Okay. Yeah, I feel like I grew up with the same thing. That American patriotism is just beyond, like intense.
Yeah.
It's intense. Yeah. And it wasn't until I was an adult that someone pointed out how interesting and indoctrinating it is for like us to do the Pledge of Allegiance. They're like, you're pledging allegiance to a country, and I was like, yeah, my country, and I really never.
No, you're pledging allegiance to a flag.
Oh yeah, and God.
It's not even to the country; it's to the flag of the country, which is a completely symbolic thing. That hold on. Over time.
Let me think about that. I have to do the pledge in my head to be able to. I haven't done it in so long. Let me see. I can't do it in my head. I have to do it out loud. Sorry. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Yeah. We had none of that in Canada. We never pledged allegiance. We never owed fealty or loyalty or any of that stuff.
So then how was the patriotism culminated? Just an anti-American rhetoric?
Yep. It truly was. It really was.
Interesting. I wonder what was causing us to battle that way at that time. Is it the same in Canada now? Do you know?
It was because Living in Southern Ontario, which is where a large percentage of Canadians actually live. If you know nothing about Canada, you're going to notice that the population of Canada all lives within 50 miles of the American border. And a good portion, like something like 60% of the entire population of the country lives in Southern Ontario, in that small area between all of the Great Lakes. So being so close to America and having our histories so strongly interwoven with each other, and all of our infrastructure and our trade and our resource sharing and all of that, it meant that we were basically overwhelmed by American cultural things. We had all of the American television programming and radio and all of this stuff. So in the early 90s, I don't know when they started this. I don't remember. I was a child. The Canadian government mandated that anything broadcast in Canada had to have a certain percentage of Canadian created content. So they were required to play certain shows or whatever on television.
Interesting.
Yeah. As an attempt to not be overwhelmed by American culture.
Yeah, like swallowed up and lose your identity.
Yeah. So that was the whole point of it back then. And I was super on board. I really was. However, it did leave me, especially as a young adult, it left me with this really unpleasant perspective on who Americans were and what America was like. And it wasn't until years after I immigrated here that I was able to really let that go.
Yeah, and I think that that's the danger, because there's nothing wrong with patriotism, but when it's patriotism at the expense of anyone else, that's just, you're literally creating hatred and bias.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah. And now I am far more American than I ever expected to be. Ever.
What makes you American, aside from the passport?
I think that my perspective on things like freedom, autonomy, has changed a little bit. That could be just a matter of maturing as well. But I also think that the American culture that I've been living in for the last 17 years has had a big influence on that. Americans are all freedom, right? So free, like, don't tell me what to do. That's who I feel. I feel like I've adopted that a lot more.
Okay.
Also, baseball. I love baseball.
Yeah.
I love baseball.
This I will cut out, but just so you know, when I'm going to be in Boston soon, and I plan on going to Fenway Park and seeing a Red Sox game, because that's my team.
I'm so jealous. I would love to go.
Just fly over.
Maybe.
No, I've got my 2 days to myself.
Yeah.
Because it's me. I need my time alone.
Good for you. I'm so happy for you.
I'm excited.
One day I'll go to Boston, and I'm definitely going to see baseball games.
Boston is one of my favorite areas in America, actually. I love it. I know that a lot of people have an issue with Bostonians in general. One person was like, well, they're just so rude. And I was like, I'm a woman in America. People are rude to me wherever I am. At least let me be in a place that I find kind of cool, has cool history, and great food. And
exactly.
Let it go. It's the same way I feel about Paris, where, some people are like, oh, Parisians. And I'm like, for one, they're no different than a New Yorker. Or a Philly person, or, a Bostonian, an LA person, a big city person. They just have a different accent. And usually they're dressed better. And so it doesn't bother me at all. I love it. But I'm one of those people where, I also tend not to generalize populations. And I think that that's a dangerous way to behave.
Yeah. Don't stereotype people, because your perspective is always going to be colored in all of your interactions with them.
And I think that happens naturally. Like you form these natural biases after you collect certain data samples in your head. You know, like I have a certain feeling about how Vietnamese people are, or Cambodian people, or, you know, any country I've traveled to. But it doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to be right about everyone. It just means I kind of have a feel, you know?
Right.
So after you moved to New York, you then did what?
Well, I kept working in entertainment for a couple of years. And I was freelancing, so I took jobs whenever they were offered to me. And that meant that I wasn't working very consistently, especially at the beginning. So it took probably about a month to get a work permit.
Mm-hmm.
And then another few months to lift the conditions on my visa. Oh, look, it did a thumb for me, too. I think that's the first time. So I really didn't work very consistently for the first 2 years. I was really relying on my husband a lot.
Were you guys married at that time?
Yes, we got married immediately.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because I came in on a fiance visa.
Ooh.
He did the whole immigration thing on his end. He got me the fiance visa. We did our interview in Montreal. And I immigrated on March 1st, 2007. And then we were married on March 5th, 2007. So we got married immediately. So why wait? We had no reason to.
How long were you guys together before you got married?
About a year and a half.
Okay. But in Canada?
Nope. We lived long distance.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. You were in Canada.
I was in Canada, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. He was in New York.
Okay.
Yeah, and I worked in entertainment for a couple of years, but honestly, what I found about my experience in New York was that people were a lot more competitive, and while there was a lot more work going around, there was a lot more competition. There was more people looking for that work, and I really didn't feel motivated. I was not ambitious about my career, so after about 2 years, I decided that I needed to find another pathway for myself. Also, my husband was still working in entertainment. He was very well established. He had a really good career going already. So I decided to use that opportunity to find a new career path for myself. So I started moving into dog training. We got a puppy, and I started learning about dogs, and I took a dog walking job. And it launched a whole career for me.
You got a puppy. Is this a puppy that I have known?
Yes. Her name was Nix. She was perfect. I loved her so much.
You continue to love her. Love is not past tense.
Well, no, that's true. But she passed away last year.
But she was quite old.
Yeah, 14 and a half.
That's an old dog.
Yeah.
And she was a lovely dog.
And she was incredibly transformative for me. She helped me to become the better person that I feel that I am now.
Mm-hmm.
And she helped me build an entire career around dog training. And I'm just so grateful for the things that I learned with her and the work that we did together.
Yeah, so you started by being a dog walker. Now you're a professional dog trainer with your own company. So what got you from point A to point B, aside from time?
Well, after about 4 years living in New York, first of all, I hated New York. I was never happy there. I never wanted to be there to begin with. It's just that it made the most sense with his work and his career, and we needed that in order to get us started. So we lived there together for 4 years, and then we decided we need to leave here. We're going to try somewhere else. And we picked Denver, Colorado. We moved here for the express purpose of helping me to start up a dog training career, because I'd already been dog walking for about a year and a half at that point. And I realized that I really wanted to make it a career, and I wanted to get into behavior and training. So we looked for a location that might work well for that, and Denver it was. So we moved here, and I immediately started looking for work. I got a little job doing retail at a pet store that also did grooming. So that was a nice little start. And then I worked for PetSmart as a trainer. And then I also got involved with other local trainers in the area. And I got involved in the local professional network, and that gave me a lot of great contacts. And from there, I jumped off to another job with another company that really gave me a foundation to really start my career and get the education and the experience that I needed. And I was with that company for almost 10 years. So I worked with hundreds of clients, and I gained a huge amount of experience. It was really fabulous, and built my confidence enough that when I was ready, I decided to jump off and start my own company.
Okay. And so what year did you guys change from New York to Denver?
2011.
2011. Okay, very cool. And then you started your company 3 years ago, right?
In 2021.
3 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And you've been training dogs. You did lose your little soul dog last year, but she gave it a very long, good run. So I don't know very much about dog training. Obviously, you've helped me with my own dogs.
As much as I can.
As much as you can. And that's really great because I happen to have one of the best dogs in the world. I think everyone says that. Everyone's right. But what's your favorite thing to train a dog with, or to do, or in general? What's the thing where you're like, this is my favorite part?
Well, this is actually really an interesting question because it's going to be counterintuitive. My favorite thing to teach a dog is how to just do nothing.
Mm-hmm.
How to just be present and be relaxed and not need to interact with everything or feel the need to do something about all of the things that they perceive in their world. And helping them learn how to do that, just be present and do nothing, goes a very long way to helping them learn how to self-regulate their arousal levels and their emotions, so that when they are confronted by stimuli in the environment, they have a much better ability to handle it, to process the information. But not just that, to take instruction and support from their human handler, which is a really important part of owning a dog, obviously, and and how they fit into our worlds. They can't be independent. It just doesn't work that way. They're not built for human world. So we are obligated to help them learn how to fit into the world like that. And the only way that we can really do that is by helping them learn to self-regulate. Because you can do all of the training that you want, all of the sits and downs and comes and stays and all of that stuff. You can do all of that, and it will still all fall apart when an exciting dog appears, or the dump truck goes by, or something that the dog is not emotionally, hormonally capable of regulating and handling. It will throw them completely off, and they will lose all ability to do anything that you ask, including even hear or know that you're present.
Okay.
Right? So by helping them learn to self-regulate and do nothing, it gives the human an inroad to helping the dog change how they feel about those things and be able to receive support from somebody who does know what the dump truck means and what that dog means across the street, right? And to help them know that they don't need to take matters into their own hands, that they can trust that person to support them.
And so I know this about you, but I'd love for you to share more. You specifically specialize in reactive dogs, right?
Yes.
Can you explain though what a reactive dog is, though? Because I feel like that word maybe has a negative connotation, and it's not necessarily a negative in terms of the dog being aggressive or vicious.
Yeah. Well, the label reactive that we tend to give, we usually hold out until the dog is behaving in a way that is inconvenient or uncomfortable for the human handler. Mm-hmm. Truth is that all dogs are reactive in every moment of their life. They perceive a stimulus, they respond to it. That's what reactive is. right?
Technically, we all do that.
Yeah, exactly. We as biological creatures are reactive to things in our environment constantly, right? So the only time that it makes a difference is when that dog is no longer capable of processing that stimulus information and knowing how to handle it appropriate for our human perspective. That's when we give it the label reactive. Other labels could be, sometimes people will say it's aggressive. It really depends on how the dog is expressing that reactivity. Some will do it in a very offensive way where they're lunging and barking and they're baring their teeth and they look really scary. But others will be reactive in the way that they run away or they hide behind things or they cower, right? Or maybe they even shut down. All of that is a function of the same kind of process in the body, the fight or flight instinct, just manifesting in different ways according to genetics and learning history.
Okay.
Yeah. So like when you're out for a walk and your dog sees another dog and looks at it, that is a very low level of reactivity.
Right. Now, what about if you have a dog? And let's just say you have a dog. Let's call him Domino. I don't know a dog named Domino. It's not like he's sitting right by me right now. But let's say you also have two cats, and the cats like to play, but sometimes they also like to quarrel. And at both of those junctures, the dog, Domino, takes offense and will usually bark at them and not chase them, but run up to them. It almost feels like he's trying to break their situation apart, and he will whine. He'll bark immediately, but then he'll cry like he's upset. So that's a reactive, hyper-reactive is what I would say then.
That's reactive to an escalated degree where he feels like he needs to take action on the situation. Right, and that is because his arousal level has spiked up to a point where his body basically has to do something about it. So a lot of the work that I'm doing is helping dogs regulate that arousal level so that when they do spike up, they, at that high point in their arousal, they have better tools to use to help them deal with the situation. Most of the time, that is simply looking to the human for better feedback or more guidance. That's ideally what I help people do, is teach their dog that they can look to them for that information, and that when they get to that point, the best thing for them to do is look to the human instead of chasing after the cats who are fighting with each other.
That is about where we're at now. That's when the whining comes in, is he'll look at me and cry and be like, do you see this kind of thing? And
he's just responding to the other animal's arousal level. That's the other thing with dogs, is they rise to the occasion. Being social animals, if there's other dogs or other creatures in the environment who are experiencing a higher arousal level, the other animal might have a good focus for that arousal. They might have that well regulated. But if Domino does not have the ability to regulate through that experience, he's going to rise to the same level of arousal. And when he's high, he doesn't know what to do about it except,
right.
And he clearly vocalizes about it a lot.
He's a very vocal dog. I don't love that, but it's one of those things where, like, it is what it is, you know? It's a little difficult for me sometimes where he'll bark out of the blue really loud and it's startling, you know? Usually that's when he'll get in a little bit of trouble, where I'll say his name much sharper. But when it's the cat one or something, I usually try to stop him from going over. Hey, no, because, you know, when a cat's in a mood, we're not going to put another animal there because they've got their dirty claws, their mean little mouths, you know. It's not a place you want to. You don't get involved with the cat, but it's one of those things where he'll sometimes look to me for reassurance, and I'll be like, "It's fine, it's okay," and he'll like come up to me and he'll be like, and then he'll sit next to me. He sounds like a little bird, you know, that whistle sound they'll make, and I'll give him a pet, and I'll be like, "It's fine," and then he'll either calm down or he'll he is a herding dog. He'll try to get me to go over there. Well, he'll like look at me and then be like, let's go. And I'm like, I'm not going. I know what they're up to. It's nothing. It's a daily occurrence. But yeah, no, it's one of those things where I think a lot of people, when they hear the word reactive, like I said, they think it means legitimately just aggressive or violent. My dog is also someone who experiences what I would call hyperreactivity, and he's in no way aggressive or violent. He just, he's dramatic.
Well, here's the thing, though. Reactivity and arousal will always, almost always, escalate to a point. Now, most dogs will cut it off. That's part of our the genetic legacy that they have. Most dogs won't get to that point where they're biting, but all dogs are capable of that. All dogs are capable of that. And we describe arousal on what we call the ladder of aggression, where at the very lowest rung of the ladder are the subtle signals that the dog is escalating, things like lip licks, head turns, and then you get like crouching, like creeping, and then whale eye, you know, where they show the whites of their eyes, and then freezing, lip curl, growling, barking, lunging. Biting is at the very top of the ladder of aggression.
Okay.
And the truth is that all dogs are capable of following that entire escalation. Yeah. Right? Given the right, i.e. wrong, circumstances.
Right. I mean, I think all humans are capable of violence too. It depends on how it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean it's a bad dog or anything. Now, a question about whale eye, because I've heard you mention this before. Domino gives me whale eye every single day. Like, he side-eyes me. That's the sassiest, most judgmental dog I've ever seen with that look. Is that something to be concerned about, or is that maybe also a personality trait of his?
That's probably just, I would say that's a personality trait. Another thing to recognize is that all dogs are individuals. So while there is a ladder of aggression that is like a general guideline, each dog will have an individual way of expressing that escalation of arousal, right? And that can come from genetics and learning history. Like a terrier, for example, is possibly going to get to the top of that ladder of aggression a lot more quickly than like a companion dog, like a pug or a cavalier.
Right.
Because
I was about to say a terrier just lives in the top 3 sections.
Because that's what these dogs were bred for. So you have to always consider, what is your specific breed meant for, and what is the selective breeding history behind that dog. Yeah,
and I think something that's also really important to you and to me, but you're the professional, so it matters a little more with you, is choosing a dog not just because it's cute, not just because you like how it looks or how it'll make you feel, but because it matches your lifestyle and who you are. Because you and I actually had extensive conversations for probably about 6 months to a year when I wanted a dog. And you're actually one of the reasons you helped me choose the type of dog I have. And he's not really what you recommended because he's a mutt. He's not a pure breed anything, because it's really not how I get to live or what I care to do. But he's a Sheltie, like you recommended, mixed with Shiba Inu. Which I think is where a lot of the whale eye comes in. Because if you think of a Shiba Inu, they basically always look a little judgmental. They're always a little bit like, you know? Totally. But we talked about that. And so can you maybe dive into some of the breeds that people choose to have where they shouldn't, based off of their lifestyle or their living conditions or stuff like that, and the importance of not maybe making selfish decisions?
Well, it can be really tough to know what you're getting into, first of all. You can do all kinds of research and like choose a breed that works for you. You can even go to an amazing breeder who has a great history and a great line of lineage in their dogs. But then every dog's still an individual. So you have to look at the individual dog in front of you.
Yeah.
I definitely think that it's the smarter choice to choose a dog based on what you know of their breed and how that might fit into your life circumstances. For example, if you're like a big active hiker, then you could totally get something like a cattle dog or a lab or one of the Belgian breeds or a German Shepherd, any of those dogs, knowing that you are going to be able to fulfill their physical exercise needs a little more comfortably than other people who maybe are less active and don't necessarily want to get out into the mountains every weekend. You know what I mean?
Right.
One of the reasons that we chose a Cavalier Poodle mix when we got our first dog was because first my husband had never had a dog before. So we wanted something that would be really biddable meaning easy to train. Would be very amenable to meeting our physical activity level without trying to push us and have a big need for more.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah, and Nyx was wonderful in her temperament.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Huskies.
Huskies. Huskies are very popular.
I know.
Yeah, because they're beautiful.
Yes.
But they're also working dogs, right? This dog was bred to run long distances and pull heavy loads and to live in cold climates. So, like, if you live in the desert, might not be a good choice for a dog for you. If you are hanging out, if your favorite thing to do is hang out on the couch and watch movies and never do anything, maybe not a good choice.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Why are they so vocal?
I have no idea. That's a good question.
It's like a very common trait of theirs because
It really
I don't know
is.
if you remember, but Husky was my number one top dog. I was like, I love them so much. They're so beautiful. And you wouldn't let me get one. And it's a good call, right? Like I wouldn't say I'm sedentary, but I'm not working dog level of like,
No. Yeah.
I will take a walk every day, but if the weather is not right, I'm not going out there. I'm not dealing with that, you know?
Totally.
And
That's the kind of dog that is not forgiving of those things. You need to take them out and you need to take care of their needs every single day.
Yeah.
Every day.
I desperately,
for the rest of their lives.
Yep. I desperately wanted a Husky. I still love them, but you know, were very helpful with saying basically like, it wouldn't fit your lifestyle, and not just because of the sedentary thing, but I'm not great with the constant loud noises like barking, you know?
Yeah.
It would make me
vocal.
very unhappy. Domino's very vocal to me, and he hasn't made a noise this whole time. You know, I couldn't imagine a Husky, and also they're very stubborn, and I'm very stubborn, and I think that might have almost created some resistance in the house, you know?
Yeah. There are some breeds who are more independent than others. And that means that when you want to work on training them, you have to really meet them in the middle. You have to find a way to compromise with each other. First of all, take care of their needs, because if you're not taking care of their needs effectively, you cannot expect them to meet your selfish human expectations.
Right.
You have to fulfill them first. Also, in the moment when you're working with them, you also have to recognize where their comfort level is at and what their desires are. And you have to find ways to provide for what they want in the moment. Otherwise, they're never going to work for you. Dogs are inherently selfish creatures. That means that it doesn't matter what you want. It's about what they want. It's about their needs and their concerns, right? And you need to help them learn how to deal with that, and also recognize that working with you is their surest pathway to getting the things that they need and want in their life.
Okay. And I think that's something that most people wouldn't agree about at all. You know, they're like, no, my dog only loves me. They do these things because they love me. And I think people equate obedience to love, and I don't think that that's the pathway.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's a huge myth overall that the dogs do things because they love us. They don't. They do love us, absolutely, but they do things because it works for them, right? And there are some dogs who want to please you. Again, that's an individual personality situation. But as a general rule, no, dogs don't work for people because they want to please us. They work for people because we provide them with all of their needs.
That's something I very much so recognize in my own dog. You know, I have had other dogs in the past that you're aware of that were extremely needy because I wasn't necessarily who raised them. So they had this different, almost cloying personality where it came to like they couldn't be left alone because that's not what they were used to. Whereas Domino, who I raised and trained on my own, is very different. And if I want a different type of behavior from him, I won't get it because I raised him to do what he wants to do within parameters of, you know, being a good boy, you know, and not getting hurt. But that also means that like when he was a puppy and he would frustrate me and I would say, go be by yourself, you know, and I taught him that phrase and that meant that he went and sat somewhere else.
Yeah.
And now that he's older, I will sometimes call him and I want to love on him and pet him and like hold him. And he'll look at me and very much so be communicating like, I don't care for this right now. And when I stop, he'll walk away and go sit on his own, you know, and that's his personality. And I love it. But it's one of those things where it's obvious he's not there to please me. Because if he was, he wouldn't have left. Because I'll be like, no, please. And he's like, no, I don't feel like this right now. Later, Skater, I'm going to go sit in a different room of the house.
I want to make it clear, though, when I say dogs are selfish, inherently selfish, I don't mean that in a judgmental way. I mean that they are just self-motivated, and it's just survival instinct.
Yeah, of course. I think it's a good clarification for people who would take selfish as a negative adjective.
Let's say self-centered, self-motivated.
Yeah. They're self-motivated, but I also think we need to almost take back the word selfish. It's good to be selfish sometimes.
Yeah, agreed.
We should emulate the fact that a dog is going to put their needs, their best interest first, because that's how we all should be.
Yeah. And it has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with them. A lot of people will take personal offense to their dog's behavior. They think, oh, he's doing it on purpose or he's doing it to make me angry. Dogs aren't spiteful like that.
No, they're doing what they're doing on purpose because they're purposefully making an action, but it's not vengeance motivated.
It's not about you. Exactly.
No. I think that's us anthropomorphizing dogs a little bit there where they're like, no, they're behaving like my mother. They're so cold and off-putting. It's like, no, he just doesn't feel like having his ears poked and prodded by 10 kids right now. That's a different thing. So I think we could talk about dogs for the end of time and go back and forth. But there is something else I was hoping we could talk about. And that is the fact that you're a woman in her 40s now.
Yeah, 40.
And I know how old you are. I was just trying to decide. I was trying to read if you were okay with me saying it.
Of course.
Yeah. And you are someone who has chosen not to have children.
Yes.
And I'd love to talk to you about that because I wouldn't say I've necessarily chosen not to have children permanently. I've just chosen not to have children at this juncture, and I'm not sure if that will change. But you have reached a juncture where you have chosen you will not have children, period.
Correct.
And I would love to talk to you about that because I think that that's a really inspiring path for a lot of people and one that is not attainable for a lot of people because I'm sure you're aware of this, but for our readers, there is often times where a woman will maybe try to go have their tubes tied or, and they can't because a doctor will tell them no, or will ask them how their husband feels, or will tell them, well, wait until you're older. Wait until, you have a kid. There's a lot of places in the States where until you have your first kid, they won't consider it.
And even then, a lot of doctors won't even talk about it.
Yes. And I think it's disgusting, because it's one of those things where they tell us we have bodily autonomy, but not if you want to do something different than the norm. And you are someone who fortunately found a doctor who did tubal ligation.
I had a laparoscopic salpingectomy.
Wow, I will not remember that word past now. So you had something done and you never had kids. And there also wasn't a medical push for the doctor to be able to accept that. So I know that this shouldn't be fantastical, but how did you manage that?
Well, first of all, I want to recognize my privilege that I am, at the time, I was a 30, when did I do it?
Not that long ago.
No, I was 35.
You did not 35. Do it 5 years ago?
Yeah, I was January 2019.
No, you didn't. You did it after I moved here.
January 2019.
I still lived in the States then, though. I thought you did it once I was here.
Well, I don't know. January 2019.
You know when I moved here. I moved here in May 2019.
Yeah, so obviously I did it before you left.
I don't remember you having a recovery period or anything. Oh, you know what?
Because it was easy.
I remember this. I was there. Never mind. I
remember. You came and you helped me with, I can't remember.
You couldn't pick stuff up, and I came and I helped you and drove you somewhere.
It was a really easy recovery for me. I had no problem with it. I was maybe a day of low activity and painkillers, and then within a week I was back to normal.
Yes, I was there. I'm sorry. It was such a small thing that it.
Yeah. Well, so the privileges that I had going into this situation were, I am a white woman, first of all. I want to acknowledge that. As a white person, I feel like that gives me a lot more access to things. Mm-hmm. I'm married. I was married for quite a long time at that point. I had really good private health insurance at the time. So we were able to afford that. So I was able to go to a doctor who had no financial reason for denying me. I also live in a pretty progressive state, in a big city in a progressive state, where the general attitude towards women's rights and bodily autonomy are very pro-choice. So when I first talked to the doctor, the only question she asked me was, what if you and your husband break up and a future man that you want to be with wants to have children? I was like, I wouldn't be with that person, first of all. And she took that. She was like, okay, that's a great answer. She said, let's go ahead.
Yeah.
So I felt like that worked all in my favor.
So
she never questioned my reasons.
Okay.
She didn't ask me anything except that one question.
So you got minimal pushback in your opinion. In my opinion, the fact that she asked that question of all of them and not, are you worried about a family history of such and such or anything like that, is a little bit frustrating to me.
Well, we did go through all of those things.
Okay.
I mean, all of the medical stuff, like we cleared all of that beforehand. And, I was very clear that I always knew this about myself, and I was 100% certain that I would never regret this decision. So the only question that she felt was relevant at the time was about a potential future relationship that didn't even exist. Well,
I still find that so frustrating because I know that that's a common enough question. And for me, I think it's nice that there was only one and it wasn't like, well, what about this or that? But for me, it's frustrating that her consideration was some man that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And his feelings.
I agree. I don't know. There could have been some kind of a policy about that. I don't really remember the details of why she asked me those questions. But she asked it very non-judgmentally, and she took my answer, and then we moved on immediately. So she didn't argue. We didn't dwell on it, so it was fine.
And I think that this is a great time to also add in that, like, yes, you didn't have a very difficult time. You were able to get it done. You were fortunate enough that, like, circumstances lined up where it made it easier for you than most. However, there are women who kind of experience the opposite of that, specifically Native women who were giving birth, and after they'd give birth to one child, the doctor, without consent, would sterilize the women.
Yeah, I know that happens. I think that still happens, and that's absolutely disgusting.
It does still happen.
That's criminal, and it should be considered to be a physical assault.
I think it is. I think bodily autonomy is one of those things that you know, it should be one of the top things we protect as a government.
I agree.
The only time I think bodily autonomy is not as important is if you're physically hurting yourself and someone has to, like, take a razor out of your hands, you know?
They need to intervene.
Yeah, but this is not that. And so it doesn't matter because for me, knowing that, like, the sterilization thing happens, something else that's really had me livid when it comes to women's health care is, aside from us just not necessarily being listened to, but women who give birth in the hospital and the doctor, when stitching up maybe from an episiotomy, will add an extra stitch, and they literally call it the husband stitch because it makes a woman feel tighter down there.
Yeah, I've heard of that. Completely disgusting.
Yeah, and so because you're someone who's kind of done something that should be more common in terms of being talked about and being available and something that can happen more often, I wanted to talk to you because women's health rights, especially in America, because that's really all we can talk on, or you might be able to have some Canadian insight, but for me, it's an American insight. I think it's important that we talk about it. You've gone through some things. I've gone through some things, not necessarily with my genitalia, but kind of in a way because I am an expat. I keep it private where I am. But what I will say is that a few years ago, I had a pap smear that they were not gentle with me at all. They didn't listen to me when I asked for a smaller speculum. And they tore my cervix. And after a month of bleeding, I finally was able to, I had to go back to the same doctor because of how the doctors work here. I had to go back to the same doctor to ask for like a referral to a gynecologist who was like, oh, your cervix is like so thin and it's, hurt and stuff like that. And they had to cauterize me 3 different times over about a month and a half, which is painful.
What a horrible ordeal.
Because someone wouldn't listen to me about my own genitalia when I was like, I need a smaller one. And they literally said, this is fine.
Wow.
It basically it was incredibly painful, the pap smear. And then when I stood up, it basically felt like a water balloon popped.
Ooh, oh gosh.
It was
so uncomfortable.
Yeah, it was very uncomfortable. And I think what's worse is that the assistant who did my pap smear was a woman.
Oh, that's horrifying. The misogyny is coming from inside the house.
Yes, the misogyny often comes from inside the house. And that's why I think it's so important for us to have these discussions and get these stories out, because your journey to your blah, 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 blah surgery that I can't say is atypical. And my experience is the norm.
Yeah, I agree with you. And that's why I really needed to acknowledge the privilege that I went into the situation with and that I still have.
Yeah. And it's not even just privilege. It's also lucky circumstances,
Agreed. Yeah. There's definitely a good amount of luck that has gone into my life.
Which is wonderful. And I wouldn't wish it away from you. I just wish it
so grateful
for more people,
Agreed.
Now, it has been apparently 5 years since you've had this done. Almost 6 years then, if it's January. So can you tell me Do you regret it?
Not at all.
No?
I am so happy with with how it has changed my psychology, how I feel just much more safe in my body. Because before, when I had the potential capability of reproduction, there was always that like fear in the back of my mind that this might happen to me, whether it was an accident with somebody that I was choosing to have intercourse with, just an accident, or whether it was an assault situation, which, as you know, as a woman, is totally possible. And I've just been really lucky. It hasn't happened so far. I lived with this fear that there was a chance, especially being in America, where I might get pregnant and then be denied bodily autonomy. I have known my entire life, since the very moment that I had any even aware of this possibility, that I did not want to have children. I never wanted to go through the physical experience. I never wanted to have the lifestyle of experience of raising a child, birthing and raising a child, right? I've always known that about myself. So it was one of my biggest fears living in the back of my mind, that was a possibility as long as I was still capable of reproducing, that it was possible. So I just decided one day when I was around 35 to just take action and take care of it.
Yeah.
And it was so empowering, because ever since then, I feel a huge load off my shoulders.
A weight has been lifted.
And it's not like I was ever irresponsible with my sexual activity. However, accidents happen, and I just don't want to be a victim of an accident and then someone else's decision and judgment on what I should do with my body.
Yeah, which is very important. And I think it's good to note that you're saying, I never wanted children. I have always known this about myself, because a lot of times we're told, oh, that'll change. And you're going to change your mind. So when I was a child, I wanted children because that is what I was told my role was in the world. You know? And then I got a little bit older, and I thought, oh, I would like a child because that's the next step in my life. And then I thought, oh, I would like a child because I'm cute and they would be cute. And then I matured, and I thought, I have not once wanted a child because I want to raise something, because I want to house something in my body. In fact, I'm terrified of pregnancy. It's actually a legit, like you're saying, it's a phobia of mine. The idea of something growing and changing my body and possibly causing me fatality when it exits me or beforehand, none of that is an appealing thing to me. The only reason I haven't fully written off being a mother at some point is because I thought I'd want it when I was younger, and I'm not sure. And because I'm not 100% sure in either direction, I'm not going to make a decision that you've made, but I also won't be making a decision to have a child,
Agreed. Yeah. I always feel like if you have any question marks about the situation, that the answer is no.
Right.
Don't reproduce unless you 100% know that that's what you want for your life. Right? If you have any questions about it, are not at all certain, then don't do it.
Exactly.
Because it is a life-changing decision, and it affects not just you, but that child who you are now raising and basically forcing them to experience life.
Right.
That's a big reason. As I've matured, it's a reason that I've grown into for not wanting to have children. Obviously, I didn't think this way when I was a child, but as I've grown older, I have realized more and more that life inherently begins with a lack of consent.
Right.
None of us choose to be here. I am the result of somebody else's choices. And this life is forced on me, whether I want it or not. I have to exist. I'm here. And I have very deep ethical problems with forcing that on somebody else, on an innocent creature that has no choice in the matter. So that is a justification that I have for my decision.
I mean, I don't think you need to justify anything past it's my decision. right?
Yeah,
That's all the
exactly.
justification you need. I think coming down to consent is a really tricky way to think about it because there's no possibility around
Of
that.
course. Of
And that's
course.
the only way we're like, I think consent can only work if there is a way to consent, right?
Of
Now, I
course. Yeah.
100% understand your point of view, and it is something I've thought about where it's like, I didn't choose this life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Although, we don't know really how things work behind the scenes. Maybe we did. Maybe we all chose this shit. Who knows? But, I 100% agree. I just don't think that can be an ethical reason because there's no way around it,
No, no, I acknowledge that. But that's also one of the things that I carry through in all of my interactions in life is a recognition for the other individual's autonomy and personal experience. I have a very high respect for that, both with people and with animals.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So I do my best to offer them as much autonomy in their interactions with me as I am possibly capable of giving them.
Yeah.
Because I recognize that this person, this animal, did not choose this life just like I didn't. And I want them to have as much autonomy in their life experience as they can possibly have. Because that's what I want for myself, too.
Now, just to clarify for people who will find it abhorrent that you and I don't have children and possibly never will, at least it's possibly for me. Do you hate children, Bex?
No, not at all.
No. You have a sibling who has children.
Yeah, I have 2 nephews.
Yes. I'm never sure how much detail people want to give, so I always try to be very generalized with things. I, too, have a nephew from one of my best friends, and she is wonderful and amazing, and the complete opposite of us, where she did in vitro.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, so she did in vitro, so she is the opposite in terms of she always wanted a child and reached a certain point in her life where she thought, and now's the time because I'm no longer waiting for, the perfect man who hasn't shown up yet.
Right.
I will take matters into my own hands. And I also love that she was empowered and stable enough and, put together enough to make that decision because your decision is respectable and her decision is respectable. And that's the human experience.
I support any choice that any individual wants to make for their personal life.
Right, because you're supporting choice.
Whether to reproduce or not. I mean, I have a very, let's be honest, this is an unconventional opinion to be choosing not to have children on the basis of lack of consent. Like, of course, children can't consent to being born. That's not how life works.
Right.
But I completely respect everyone's decision to whether they want to have that experience in their life.
Well, I think it's just interesting because, I'm one of my own closest friends, because I think it's important to like yourself. So I'm now realizing that out of my best friends, I have one who chose, absolutely, I will have a child by the means necessary. And one of my other best friends is absolutely not. I will not have a child and I will make sure to take those matters into my own hands to decide that. And then I kind of stand perfectly in the middle of that where I'm like, who's to say which way I'll go?
Not sure yet.
Yeah.
That's cool.
And I love that because that's the spectrum of women and our, autonomy and our rights. And I think it's a really lovely thing that we're at least at a point in time where this can even be a conversation. Because if we're being honest, even 50 years ago, not the case.
Yeah. I would not have wished to have been born in any earlier time period than what I was.
No. There's something that people keep bringing up where they're like, why were Gen X parents or why were Boomer parents this way? And it's, very dismissive, not really present, not really caring. And then you have later generations like the older millennials and their children, and they're in every part of those children's lives, and they're, almost helicopter parents. And it's, where did that shift come from? And I think the shift came from literally the fact that when Gen Xers, older Gen Xers and Boomers were having children, that was the expectation. They had to. There were no choices.
Yeah.
Versus now, right, it was an obligation versus now it can still be an obligation, and it is still an obligation for a lot of people, but for the other half, I would say it's been a choice. They've chosen to have a child and therefore are more interested in their children.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I see a lot of people and they'll say, oh, why were your parents so dismissive and blah, blah, blah. It's because they never wanted children. And it's kind of this blamey thing. And I understand it because you're angry because you want to feel loved and you want to feel wanted. But think about the fact that there's a chance that it doesn't matter if they love you or not. The fact is that they never wanted you in any form. And that's not personal because you didn't exist when they had that thought.
One thing that I highly respect my father for is the very purposeful decision he made to have children.
Mm-hmm.
I asked him about it one day, and I asked him, why did you want to have kids? And he said, it's just something that I felt like I needed in my life. And not only did he make a very purposeful decision, but he's also been extremely responsible as a parent and has done his absolute best to provide for his children and to give us a good life. And he did an amazing job.
Yeah. And see, on my end, I was absolutely an accident. There was no way that I was on purpose, and I grew up with someone who was Catholic when I was, conceived. And so removing me was not going to be an option. And my mother was 20 when she got pregnant with me.
Yeah.
That's not old enough, in my opinion. And there was also these obligations in a way to faith or, the church or your family that I was coming, whether she wanted to or not, or was ready or not. And I definitely think that affected my childhood and my upbringing, and not in a positive way.
Yeah, exactly. It's because she was ultimately denied autonomy. Right?
She
whether directly or coercively through her family and her religion and her lifestyle, culture, all of those things.
Well, another thing to note is that my mother was unaware she was pregnant with me until about 5 months.
Oh gosh, wow, that's late.
Well, she didn't gain weight until her 3rd trimester. And so I was a surprise through and through. I know that at the very least she had completely finished the 1st trimester by the time she even was aware of me. So that's not even just, no one coerced her, because like I'm saying, she never ever could have had a choice.
Yeah, it was too late by the time she even was aware.
And even if it wasn't too late, then the other factors come into play.
Right, exactly.
There would have never been a choice there. And also because of how Catholic, upbringing is, there's also no contraception.
Yeah, that's right.
So it's a thing where it's unfortunate, because maybe my mother would have been a different type of mother had she gotten to become an adult herself, because your brain isn't even done until you're 25.
Yeah.
But you're going to make a whole nother brain before then. It's an interesting burden that we put on women, and I don't think it's fair. And I'm glad that for people like you and people like me, we're choosing to change that tide in whichever direction we want. And also people like my other best friend who's done IVF, that's also a completely counterculture thing to do. All of these things are brave. They're just different directions.
Yep, exactly. Mm-hmm.
Well, Bex, this has been a lovely conversation. I have a few questions for you just to end this out. For one, is there anything that you didn't get to share that you'd like to?
Not that I can think of.
Okay. And then I have 2 more questions. So first, I like to ask people, is there a song that you would like me to add to your article? Something, your favorite song, or something that reminds you of something we talked about, something important to you, a vibe you would like. What would that be? I need the title and the artist.
My favorite song is Levi Stubbs' Tears by Billy Bragg.
Okay. And what was your favorite book as a child?
Oh, that one's easier. Jane Eyre.
Really?
Yeah,
What?
I've read it a few times.
Okay, very cool. And then last question, and this part won't be in your article, but it will be in mine. So what I'm doing is at the end of everyone's interview, I'm allowing them to interview me with a question. And at the end of the book will be my interview from every single woman I interviewed, them getting to ask me something.
Okay. Okay, my question for you is, would you ever move back to the States?
I would, absolutely.
Yeah? Why?
I haven't built a community here.
Okay.
And so I do feel quite alienated where I am. I have been here for half a decade, and I wouldn't say I have more than one family here that I consider friends. They happen to also be American. So it's one of those things where I'm quite lonely. I haven't gone back to the States for political reasons, and not just election when I say political, but also I have healthcare here that I've never experienced before. I got a surgery when I first moved here, within the first year of me being here, that I had needed since I was about 9 or 10 years old.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
But we could never afford it.
A lot of Americans are vying to get out of this country. They really are, for all of the reasons that you've just stated.
Yeah, there's a lot of reasons for me to not go back, but I don't feel like my partner is going to be someone here, you know?
Okay.
I don't know if I'll be able to find that here. And there are certain things culturally that I kind of miss, like, you know, just certain foods or the way we all get excited at the same holidays or, you know, if I'm being really, really honest, one of the things I miss a lot is like Michael's.
Michael's?
The crafting store.
Oh.
You know, having that like Michael's where they have all of the cute things for all of the seasons, and like, you know how much I love things like that. And like here, I'm the only house I've seen, period, that has like a wreath on their front door.
Oh, yeah.
You know, so I kind of miss that like feeling of belonging. And I didn't really feel like I belonged in Denver. I feel alien here. And so I don't think that this is my permanent stop, but I also have never felt at home anywhere. So I think instead of staying in one place, I'll have hubs all over. So here I already have my hub. I think I'd like one in London and then an East Coast hub. So probably Boston or, you know, New York area, maybe California, maybe something more tropical. But I think I've now hit the point in the age where I've realized that home is not going to be a place for me. It's going to probably be a person. And right now that person is me. And hopefully that person expands out to be more than one person. But it can't be. I'll go back at some point, but I don't know if it's on a permanent basis. And I don't know if it would be on a full-time basis.
Yeah, I understand. I completely get it.
Well, thank you so much for being interviewed today. I hope it was a good experience for you.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.